So 15th century Germany had a fantastic way of settling marital differences with divorce by combat, and they found that a fight to the death was the perfect way to break up. In the past, trial by combat was a popular way to settle legal disputes, and sometimes husband and wife would go against each other. However, their rules would be different to a usual trial by combat. The rules for divorce by combat came from a fencing manual which was produced in 1467, which dealt in many different duels, with this being one of them. They would fight in bodysuits, and due to the physical advantage that the husband had, he would be placed in a 1 meter deep hole where one hand would be tied behind his back, and his weapon of choice would be a club, and he would be given 3 of them. The wife, however, could run around the ring freely, and she would be given 3 rocks weighing roughly 1 to 5 pounds wrapped in this cloth, and the cloth and the club were matching lengths to ensure equal range. The man was not allowed to leave his hole, and if he touched the edge of it, he would have to forfeit one of his clubs, whereas if the woman attacked him during this forfeit, she would have to give up one of her rocks. Whether it was a fight to the death or not is unclear, and victory conditions were a bit hazy, but it seems like one of the parties would have knocked the other unconscious due to the blunt weapons they were using, or you could drag the wife into the hole, or drag the husband out of it. It is believed that these duels did eventually end in death though, as if the husband lost, he would be executed within the town square, and if the wife lost, she would be buried alive. So next time you're trying to spice up your love life with your partner, why not try giving this bad boy a good go? So in the Middle Ages, quite a few people got their heads chopped off, and for that you require an executioner. However, it wasn't all fun and games, as their job was actually pretty grim. The image of the executioner wearing all black and a mask to cover their identity was not actually the case, as many people actually knew who they were, and they were often shunned members of society due to their dirty work. Even though the executioners were given a warrant authorising the removal of a criminal's head to protect them from the charge of murder, the view that someone could willingly kill another man on command just didn't sit right with the general public. Executioners were often forced to live at the edges of towns with the poor and lepers, and unable to attend church, and unlikely to be top of anyone's Christmas card list. However, they were essential in maintaining law and order. They would travel around regions and often get paid fairly well for their work. However, it was not every day that someone wanted their head chopped off, so they had to take up other roles such as animal carcass collector and tax collector. The role also required a high degree of precision and competence as well, as every execution was expected to go smoothly, and if not, they were accused of incompetence and cruelty against the victim, and likely attacked by the crowd who watched. Victims getting their heads lopped off would also tip the executioner quite well to make sure their death was as clean as possible. The job required a good understanding of human anatomy so they could perform such precise swings, and it contained an unusually high literacy rate for people of such low social standing, and they could often double as a role as a doctor. They did get some benefits though, such as tax exemptions and free lodgings by the local government to try and keep them in the role so they wouldn't run away and become a farmer. But why would anyone apply to such a job? Well, it was usually given to people who had little choice in the matter, such as butchers forced into the role, or criminals taking up the job as an alternative to their own death, and it was a family business, so fathers would pass down the role of executioner to their sons, creating executioner dynasties. The social isolation and brutality in their work often led executioners into a life of crime, and in turn, they would sometimes find themselves on the chopping block. So these magnificent beauties here are the medieval murder rabbits, bunnies whose savageness often appeared in illuminated manuscripts between the 13th and 15th century. The illuminated manuscripts were decorated with gold and silver and symbolised the new era of textual literacy, material culture and spiritual devotion. The manuscripts were written by monks and nuns who were living in monasteries and took a high degree of craftsmanship and time to produce, and they were often used within churches, so why the murderous bunnies? Marginalia, as it was known, was the process of adding scribbles and doodles into the margins of books in order to enhance the understanding for future readers, as before the printing press was invented, books were extremely expensive to reproduce and had to be copied by hand, so they were seen as a long-term investment likely passed down from generation to generation. The rabbit images we see are known as drolleries, used for entertainment and humour, and depict lots of weird scenarios, with this one being my personal favourite of dogs sieging a rabbit tower. The drolleries turned the world upside down and subverted expectations of society, as the typical depiction of the rabbit at the time was one of cowardice, weakness, purity and innocence, a cuddly ball of fluff who couldn't harm anyone. Because of what rabbits symbolised, it was amusing to them, as it is to me, to draw them acting out a rage-filled revenge on those who hunted and killed them, such as this rabbit here hunting a dog. The bloodthirsty rabbits were also used to show the cowardice and stupidity of a person, as if you were getting bludgeoned by a bunny, you were quite the loser, such as this chap here, who's about to get executed by this savage bunny. The images were also often used to amuse the unlucky soul who had to sit down for painstakingly long hours, reading and copying these texts, as monks and nuns, to show their devotion to God, often sat in solitude from morning all the way until night time, copying and illuminating such works, so I think it's fair to them that they often spiced it up by drawing some funny rabbits. Just like today's memes, some of these rabbits have no captions or context of them, but you can tell that the illustrator was having a fantastic time using their creativity to draw such bizarre scenarios, and you have to remember that the Middle Ages was a society full of barriers, and they used the culture of laughter and humour to make the world for them a little bit more bearable. So what do the fork, the crossbow, and the cat all have in common? Well, according to the medieval Catholic Church, all three of them are work of the devil and should have been banned from existence. The fork was introduced to Europe in the late 10th century from trade routes to the east, and Italy was the first to take up the trend, with it becoming commonplace in the upper class by the 14th century. Northern Europe though saw the fork as the unmanly utensil of the Italians, and Roman Catholic writers said that God had already provided us fingers to eat our food with, and it would be an excessive delicacy to use the fork and blasphemous against the word of the Lord. By the 18th century though, the fork had been welcomed into every home with open arms, probably due to how effective it was in saving your hands getting messy. The crossbow saw its ban in April 1139 when the Catholic Church held a council of over 1,000 members to deal with the conflicts that had arisen due to the last pope being labelled as an anti-pope and religious morals were severely lacking. Rule 29 of the meeting stated, "We prohibit under anathema that murderous art of crossbowmen and archers, which is hateful to God, to be employed against Christians and Catholics from now on." However, from how effective these weapons were on the battlefield, no one really cared on how banned they were, and still used them anyway. But the ruling is a little bit hazy, so it's not sure what the ban completely entailed. And finally, the best of the lot, Pope Gregory IX's war on cats, as he believed they were being worshipped during satanic initiation ceremonies, which some heretics revealed under the confession of torture, which is known to be quite a reliable source of information. In an official papal bull in 1233, cats, especially black cats, were said to be the work of the devil and they should be rid from this world. The Pope's catcalling led to some debate on whether the lack of cats caused rats to run rampant and spread the Black Death roughly a century later. However, there's no evidence on how many cats were disposed of or how long the culling went on for, and even in cat-loving countries such as Egypt, the plague still ran rampant. So by today's standards, the medieval world was an extremely strange place to be, and that was especially true when looking at the medicine of their time. Knowledge of how the body functions and how disease was spread was somewhat lacking back then, and it was thought to be God's divine justice if you got sick, as a way to purify your soul and test your beliefs. Medical knowledge in the Middle Ages was largely based on ancient Greek works, where they believed the body was made up of humours which represented the natural forces in the world, with air, fire, water and earth. The four humours were black bile, phlegm, blood and yellow bile, which were all believed to be produced by different organs and were affected by planetary alignment, and the four humours had to be kept in balance if a person wanted to remain healthy. Balancing the four humours could be achieved with diet, medicines and bloodletting by either cutting someone or using leeches to extract the blood to maintain balance. Herbal remedies mixed into food and drink were also administered to the sick, with Christian doctrine stating that God had provided an alleviation to every sickness and different substances helped with different sicknesses, so you'd mix them together for certain parts of the body. One strange method that was used during the Black Plague was the Vickery method, where a chicken would be plucked off its feathers on its behind and strapped onto the person's buboes, and when the chicken starts getting sick, it's believed that it's drawing out the plague from the person. To cure some mental disorders which some doctors thought to be the work of the devil, a method called tree panning would be used, where they cut a hole in the skull with various knives, and they believed that the evil spirit would fly out the hole in the skull and leave the patient cured. While it seems they had no idea what they were doing, medieval medicine was actually well studied in universities, with physicians actually being quite knowledgeable on the subject. It's just that the information they had would be seen as pretty ridiculous by today's standards. The Middle Ages also lessened the taboo on human dissection, with it becoming prominent in around the late 13th century, allowing for advancements in human body knowledge. Repeated plagues and common battlefield injuries did allow physicians to gain a better understanding on how the human body worked and cure some of these illness and sicknesses. And while a lot of their methods were very hit and miss, I imagine if you did travel back in time to the Middle Ages, I would recommend taking some paracetamol before some doctor shoves a frog up your bum.